Imagine waking up one day to find out your entire life has been a lie. That the mundane, everyday routine you've been living was just a fade, hiding a truth so shocking it could rewrite your destiny. This is the story of Claire Bennett, a woman who spent her days scrubbing floors, polishing silverware, and folding laundry in the shadows of the wealthy and powerful. She was just a housekeeper until one fateful morning when she inherited an empire she never knew existed. But this isn't just a rags-to-riches tale. It's a labyrinth of secrets, betrayal, and a mystery so deep that even Clara herself couldn't have imagined the twists and turns her life was about to take. By the end of this video, you'll uncover the truth behind Clara's sudden rise to power, the dark forces that tried to stop her, and the shocking revelation that changed everything. But be warned, once you step into this world, there's no turning back. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible? Like, no matter how hard you work, how much you give, the world just doesn't see you. Clara knew that feeling all too well. For years, she moved through the grand halls of the Blackwood estate, unseen and unnoticed, while the elite of New York City sipped champagne and made decisions that shaped the world. But what if I told you that Clara's invisibility was her greatest strength? That while everyone overlooked her, she was quietly observing, learning, and preparing for a moment that would change everything. This story isn't just about wealth or power, it's about resilience, about the quiet strength of someone who's been underestimated their entire life. And it's about the moment when the underdog finally gets their chance to rise. Now, let's set the stage. The Blackwood Empire wasn't just any fortune, it was one of the most powerful and secretive dynasties in America. From real estate to tech, from politics to media, the Blackwoods had their hands in everything. But behind the glitz and glamour, there was a darkness that no one dared to speak of. When the patriarch, Victor Blackwood, passed away under mysterious circumstances, the world expected his ruthless children to take over. Instead, the will revealed a name no one recognized: Claire Bennett. A housekeeper. A nobody. Or so they thought. Overnight, Claire became the most talked-about person in the country. But with great power comes great danger, and Clara soon found herself in a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal that threatened to destroy everything she had just gained. Who was Clara, really? Why did Victor Blackwood leave his empire to her? And what secrets were hidden within the walls of the Blackwood estate that could bring the entire dynasty crashing down? These are the questions that will keep you hooked, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll have the answers. But here's the thing, every answer leads to another question, and every revelation pulls you deeper into the mystery. This isn't just Clara's story, it's a story about power, about family, and about the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. It's a story that will make you question everything you think you know about wealth, loyalty, and the true cost of ambition. As we dive into Clara's world, you'll meet the key players in this high-stakes drama. There's Eleanor Blackwood, the icy matriarch who will stop at nothing to protect her family's legacy. There's Alexander Blackwood, the charming but volatile heir who believes the empire is rightfully his. And then there's James Carter, the enigmatic lawyer who seems to know more about Clara's past than he's letting on. Each character has their own agenda, their own secrets, and their own role to play in the unfolding drama. But the most important character is you, the viewer. Because this story isn't just something you watch, it's something you experience. You'll feel Clara's fear, her determination, her hope. You'll be right there with her as she navigates a world she was never supposed to be part of. And you'll be the one to decide who you can trust in a story where nothing is as it seems. So, why should you keep watching? Because this isn't just a story, it's a journey. A journey that will take you from the glittering penthouses of Manhattan to the shadowy corners of the Blackwood estate. A journey that will keep you guessing until the very end. And a journey that will leave you questioning what you would do if you were in Clara's shoes. Would you fight for the truth, even if it meant risking everything? Or would you walk away, leaving the secrets buried where they belong? The choice is yours, but I can promise you this, once you start this journey, you won't want to stop. But before we go any further, Let me leave you with this. As Clara stood in the grand hall of the Blackwood estate, holding the will that changed her life, she noticed something strange. A single line, written in Victor's handwriting, that no one else seemed to see. It read, "The truth lies where the shadows meet the light." What did it mean? Was it a clue, a warning, or something else entirely? Clara didn't know, but she was determined to find out. And so are we. So, are you ready to step into the shadows and uncover the truth? Because the story of Clara Bennett is just beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Clara Bennett's life had always been one of quiet routine, a rhythm of early mornings and late nights spent in service to the Blackwood family. She had grown up in a small, forgotten town in upstate New York, the daughter of a single mother who worked herself to the bone just to keep food on the table. Clara had learned early on that the world wasn't kind to people like her, people who didn't have money, connections, or a name that meant anything. When she moved to New York City at 18, she had no grand dreams of making it big. She just wanted to survive. The Blackwood estate had been her refuge, a place where she could blend into the background and do her work without drawing attention. But now, standing in the opulent study of Victor Blackwood, holding the document that named her as the sole heir to his empire, Clara felt anything but invisible. The room seemed to close in around her, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She had always known there was something strange about Victor, the way he would sometimes watch her with an unreadable expression, the way he would ask her questions about her life that felt more like an interrogation than casual conversation. But she had never imagined this. Never in her wildest dreams. The Blackwood family, of course, was not about to let this stand. Eleanor Blackwood, Victor's widow, was a woman who had spent her entire life building and protecting the family's legacy. She was not about to let it fall into the hands of a housekeeper, no matter what Victor's will said. Eleanor was a master of manipulation, a woman who could charm a room full of people while quietly plotting their downfall. She had always seen Clara as nothing more than a servant, a cog in the machine that kept the Blackwood estate running. But now, Clara was a threat to Eleanor's power, to her family's future, and to the secret she had spent decades burying. Eleanor's first move was to call a family meeting, summoning her children, Alexander and Isabella, to the estate. Alexander, the eldest, was the heir apparent, a man who had been groomed since birth to take over the family business. He was handsome, charismatic, and utterly ruthless, with a temper that could flare at a moment's notice. Isabella, on the other hand, was the wild card. She had always been the black sheep of the family, more interested in art and activism than in the cutthroat world of business. But even she couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. The three of them sat in the study, the air thick with tension as Eleanor laid out her plan. They would contest the will, of course, but that was just the beginning. They needed to dig into Clara's past to find out why Victor had chosen her, and to uncover any dirt they could use to discredit her. What they didn't know was that Claire was already one step ahead of them. Claire had always been a keen observer, a skill she had honed over years of working in the shadows. She knew the Blackwoods would come for her, and she wasn't about to let them take what was rightfully hers. But she also knew she couldn't do it alone. That's where James Carter came in. James was the lawyer who had delivered the will to Clara, and from the moment they met, she could tell there was more to him than met the eye. He was calm, collected, and fiercely intelligent, with a quiet intensity that made Clara feel both safe and unnerved at the same time. James had been Victor's most trusted advisor, and he knew more about the Blackwood Empire than anyone else. But he also had his own secrets, his own reasons for helping Clara. Together, they began to unravel the mystery of Victor's will, starting with the cryptic line Clara had noticed, "The truth lies where the shadows meet the light." It was a phrase that seemed to haunt every corner of the Blackwood estate, from the family's private library to the hidden passages that ran beneath the mansion. As Clara and James dug deeper, they began to uncover a web of lies that stretched back decades, involving not just the Blackwoods but some of the most powerful people in the country. There were whispers of illegal deals, hidden fortunes, and even murder. But the more they uncovered, the more dangerous the game became. Meanwhile, Alexander Blackwood was growing increasingly desperate. He had always been the golden boy, the one who was supposed to inherit everything. But now, with Claire in the picture, his future was slipping through his fingers. He began to take matters into his own hands, reaching out to old contacts and calling in favors to try and undermine Clara. But his efforts only seemed to backfire, drawing the attention of the media and the public, who were fascinated by the story of the housekeeper who had inherited an empire. The more Alexander tried to fight, the more Clara's star seemed to rise. But Alexander wasn't the only one who was feeling the pressure. Isabella, who had always been distant from her family, found herself drawn into the drama in ways she never expected. She had always been closer to Victor than anyone else, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his decision than met the eye. She began to dig into her father's past, uncovering secrets that even Eleanor didn't know. But the deeper she went, the more she realized that the truth might be more than she could handle. As the days turned into weeks, the tension at the Blackwood estate reached a boiling point. Claire found herself caught in a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with the Blackwoods on one side and shadowy figures from Victor's past on the other. She began to receive anonymous threats, warning her to step away from the empire or face the consequences. But Claire wasn't about to back down. She had spent her entire life being pushed to the sidelines, and she wasn't about to let anyone take this away from her. But as she delved deeper into the mystery, she began to realize that the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The Blackwood Empire wasn't just about money or power, it was about control. And there were people who would do anything to keep that control, no matter the cost. One night, as Claire was going through Victor's old files, she found something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a photograph, faded and worn, of a young Victor Blackwood standing next to a woman who looked eerily familiar. The woman was holding a baby, and scrawled on the back of the photo were the words, "For Clara." Clara's heart raced as she realized the truth. The woman in the photo was her mother. But how? Why had Victor never told her? And what did it mean for her claim to the empire? The questions swirled in her mind, but before she could make sense of it, she heard a noise behind her. She turned, but it was too late. Someone was there, in the shadows, watching her. And in that moment, Clara knew that the game had just gotten a lot more dangerous. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. And as the shadows closed in around her, Claire realized that she was no longer just fighting for an empire, she was fighting for her life. Clara's heart pounded as she stared into the darkness. The photograph of her mother and Victor Blackwood clutched tightly in her hand. The noise she'd heard was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to send a chill down her spine. She wasn't alone. The study, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like a trap, its towering bookshelves and heavy curtains hiding secrets she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She took a step back, her mind racing. Who was watching her? Was it one of the Blackwoods trying to intimidate her into giving up her claim? Or was it someone else entirely, someone connected to the shadowy figures James had warned her about? Clara knew she couldn't stay in the study any longer. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. But as she turned to leave, a voice cut through the silence, smooth and cold as ice. "Looking for something, Clara?" It was Eleanor Blackwood, standing in the doorway with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, Alexander loomed, his expression unreadable. Clara's grip tightened on the photograph. She had expected the Blackwoods to come after her, but not like this. Not in the dead of night, in the very heart of the estate. Eleanor stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You've been busy," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Digging through Victor's things, stirring up the past. But you should know, Clara, some doors are better left closed." Clara didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was still reeling from the discovery of the photograph, and now, faced with Eleanor's calculated menace, she felt more vulnerable than ever. But she couldn't let them see her fear. She straightened her shoulders and met Eleanor's gaze. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "This is my inheritance, and I'm going to fight for it." Eleanor's smile faltered for just a moment, but it was enough. Clara had struck a nerve. Before Eleanor could respond, Alexander stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours?" he snarled. "You're nothing but a housekeeper, Clara. A nobody. And if you know what's good for you, you'll walk away while you still can." Clara didn't flinch. She had spent her entire life being underestimated, and she wasn't about to let Alexander's threats shake her now. But as she stood there, facing down the Blackwoods, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this confrontation than met the eye. Why had they come to her now? What were they trying to hide? The answers, she knew, were somewhere in the shadows, and she was determined to find them. The next morning, Claire met with James Carter in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. She needed his help now more than ever, but she also needed to know if she could trust him. James had been Victor's closest confidant, but that didn't mean he was on her side. As she slid the photograph across the table to him, she watched his face carefully, searching for any hint of recognition. James picked up the photo, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he looked up at Clara, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place: regret, maybe, or guilt. "I was wondering when you'd find this," he said quietly. Clara's breath caught. "You knew?" James nodded. "Victor told me about your mother years ago. He loved her, Clara, more than anyone ever knew. But their relationship, it was complicated, dangerous even. He wanted to protect you, to keep you safe from the world he lived in. That's why he never told you the truth." Clara felt a surge of anger, but also something else, something she couldn't quite name. "He had no right," she said, her voice trembling. "He had no right to keep this from me." James reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I know," he said. "But Victor was a complicated man. He made mistakes, but he also did what he thought was best. And now, Clara, you're caught in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. The Blackwoods aren't the only ones who want control of the Empire. There are others, people who will stop at nothing to get what they want. And if they find out who you really are, you'll be in more danger than you can imagine." Claire's mind raced as she processed James's words. She had always known there was more to Victor's will than met the eye, but now the stakes were higher than ever. She wasn't just fighting for an empire, she was fighting for her life. And as much as she wanted to trust James, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. But she didn't have time to dwell on it. As they left the cafe, Claire noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted and its engine idling. She felt a prickle of unease, but before she could say anything, James grabbed her arm and pulled her into an alley. "We need to go," he said, his voice urgent. "Now." Claire didn't argue. She followed James through the maze of back streets, her heart pounding as the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. They were being followed. By who, Claire didn't know, but she had a feeling it wasn't the Blackwoods. Whoever it was, they were dangerous, and they were getting closer. As they turned a corner, Clara stumbled, her foot catching on a loose cobblestone. James caught her before she could fall, but the delay was enough. The footsteps behind them grew louder, and then, suddenly, they were surrounded. 3 men in dark suits stepped out of the shadows, their faces obscured by sunglasses and hats. Clara's breath came in short, panicked gasps as one of the men stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Clara Bennett," he said, his voice cold and mocking. "We've been looking for you." Claire's mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. She was trapped. And then, just as the man reached for her, a voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Let her go." Claire turned, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing at the end of the alley was Isabella Blackwood, her eyes blazing with fury. Eye in her hand was a gun, steady and unwavering as she pointed it at the men. "I said let her go," Isabella repeated, her voice like steel. The men hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. Then, with a nod from their leader, they stepped back, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Clara stared at Isabella, her mind reeling. Why had she helped her? What did she want? But before she could ask, Isabella lowered the gun and turned to her, her expression unreadable. "You're in over your head, Clara," she said. "But if you want to survive, you're going to need my help. And trust me, you don't have a choice." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the alley, her mind spinning with questions and her heart pounding with fear. The game had just gotten a lot more dangerous, and Clara knew that the only way out was through. But as she looked down at the photograph still clutched in her hand, she realized something else. The truth was closer than ever, and it was more terrifying than she could have imagined. Clara stood frozen in the alley, the photograph of her mother and Victor Blackwood still clutched in her hand, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet answer. Isabella's sudden appearance and even more sudden departure had left her reeling. Why had Victor's daughter, of all people, come to her rescue? What did she know that Clara didn't? And who were those men in the dark suits who had been hunting her? The answers, Claire knew, were tied to the photograph and to the cryptic words Victor had left behind. The truth lies where the shadows meet the light. She couldn't stop now. She had come too far to turn back. With James by her side, Claire made her way to the one place she knew held the key to everything, the Blackwood estate. But this time, she wasn't going in as a housekeeper. She was going in as the heir to an empire and as a woman determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The estate was eerily quiet when they arrived, the grand halls empty and the air thick with tension. Claire could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her as she walked through the familiar rooms, each step bringing her closer to the answers she so desperately needed. She headed straight for Victor's private study, the place where she had first discovered the photograph. But as she pushed open the door, she was met with a sight that stopped her in her tracks. The room had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor, and the safe in the corner wide open and empty. Someone had been here before her, someone who knew what they were looking for. Claire's heart sank as she realized that the evidence she needed might already be gone. But then she noticed something, a small, hidden compartment in the wall behind Victor's desk. One that had been cleverly concealed, but now stood slightly ajar. Inside was a single envelope, addressed to her in Victor's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a letter and a set of documents that would change everything. The letter was from Victor, written in his familiar, precise script. In it, he confessed the truth Claire had been searching for. Her mother had not been just a fleeting romance in his life. She had been the love of his life, the woman he had wanted to spend forever with. But their relationship had been forbidden, torn apart by the ruthless world of the Blackwoods and the dangerous figures who lurked in its shadows. Victor had tried to protect Claire and her mother by keeping them hidden, but it hadn't been enough. Claire's mother had died under mysterious circumstances, and Victor had spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. The documents in the envelope were proof of Claire's rightful claim to the Blackwood Empire and evidence of the crimes committed by those who had tried to keep her from it. Among them was a list of names, powerful people who had conspired to control the empire for their own gain, including some of the Blackwoods themselves. Claire's hands shook as she read through the documents, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. But there was one name on the list that made her blood run cold: James Carter. Claire turned to James, her heart pounding as she held up the documents. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James's face was pale, his usual calm demeanor shattered. "Clara, I can explain," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't have a choice. They threatened my family. I thought I was protecting you." Claire felt a surge of betrayal, but also a strange sense of relief. At least now she knew the truth. She took a deep breath, her mind racing as she tried to figure out what to do next. She couldn't trust James, but she also couldn't do this alone. And then, as if on cue, Isabella appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "I told you you'd need my help," she said. "But if we're going to do this, we need to do it now. They're coming." The next few hours were a blur. With Isabella's help, Claire gathered the evidence she needed and prepared to confront the Blackwoods and their allies. It wasn't easy. Eleanor and Alexander fought back with everything they had, using their wealth and influence to try and discredit Clara. But Claire had something they didn't: the truth. And when she finally stood before the board of the Blackwood Empire, holding the documents that proved her claim and exposed the corruption at its core, there was nothing they could do to stop her. The empire was hers, but it came at a cost. The fallout was swift and brutal. The powerful figures named in Victor's documents were arrested, their reputations destroyed. Eleanor and Alexander were stripped of their positions, their once mighty legacy reduced to ashes. And James, though he had betrayed her, was given a chance to redeem himself by helping to bring the others to justice. Claire knew she could never fully trust him again, but she also knew that he had been a victim of the same system that had tried to destroy her. In the end, Clara stood alone in the grand hall of the Blackwood estate, the weight of her victory settling over her. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth, claimed her inheritance, and brought down the people who had tried to keep her from it. But as she looked around the empty room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The empire was hers, but it had come at the cost of her innocence, her trust, and the life she had once known. And then, just as she was about to leave, she noticed something: a small framed photograph on the wall, one she had never seen before. It was a picture of Victor, her mother, and a baby, her. They were smiling, happy, a family frozen in time. Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that, despite everything, Victor had loved her. He had made mistakes, but he had also given her the tools to fight for herself and for the truth. And in that moment, Clara knew that she wasn't just the heir to an empire. She was the heir to a legacy, one of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. As the camera pans out, Clara stands tall, the photograph in her hand and the future ahead of her. The story of Clara Bennett, the housekeeper who inherited an empire, is one of triumph and tragedy, of secrets and sacrifice. But it's also a story of hope, a reminder that no matter how dark the shadows, the light will always find a way through. And as the screen fades to black, one question lingers: what will Clara do with the power she now holds? The answer, like the truth, lies where the shadows meet the light.